The radio hissed, spitting static that sliced through the fog, clogging Officer Jake Sullivan's brain. 18 hours into an unscheduled double shift, his eyes burned like they'd been rubbed with sandpaper, and his coffee had gone cold hours ago. The city was off tonight, wrong in a way he couldn't pin down but felt deep in his gut. 9 years walking the beat had sharpened that instinct, and right now, it was screaming. The streets were too quiet, the shadows too heavy, pooling like ink between the flickering streetlights. Unit 312, respond to a disturbance at 1789 Oakwood Lane. The dispatcher's voice crackled, tight and strained in a way Jake hadn't heard before. Female caller, says her boyfriend's trying to smash through the bedroom door. She's locked inside with her kid. Sounds bad. Jake thumbed the mic, his voice rough as gravel. 312, en route. ETA 4 minutes. His fingers tightened on the wheel, the cruiser's engine rumbling as he flipped on the lights. No siren. Years on domestics taught him silence could keep things from boiling over. The dashboard clock glowed 11:53 p.m. He should have been home by now, sprawled on the couch with a beer, but half the precinct had called out sick. The ones who showed looked like ghosts, pale, jittery, barely holding it together. Earlier, he'd caught Officer Diaz retching in the locker room, muttering about a headache that wouldn't quit. Something was brewing, something ugly. Reports had been piling up all night. Bar fights, random assaults, people acting feral. Witnesses stammered about attackers who didn't move right, who growled instead of spoke. 2 calls about biting, actual biting, had come in before the hospital radioed they were drowning in patients. Jake shook it off, turning onto Oakwood Lane. Neat little houses lined the street, porches dotted with bicycles and flower pots. Normal, except for the way the darkness seemed to cling to everything. 1785, 1787, 1789, the front door of the last house gaped open, with splintered around the latch. A dark smear, blood, no question, streaked the frame, glistening under the porch light. Hell, Jake muttered, grabbing his flashlight. His hand grazed his holstered SIG Sauer, its weight a small comfort against the unease gnawing at him. Dispatch, 312's on scene. Doors forced. Send backup. Static buzzed back, sharp and empty. He tried again. Nothing but white noise. The radio had been flaky all shift, another bad sign in a night full of them. The house loomed ahead, silent except for a faint flicker from an upstairs window. Jake stepped onto the porch, boots crunching on glass from a shattered bulb. The air was thick, humid, carrying a faint coppery tang that made his stomach twist. "Police," he called, voice flat against the oppressive stillness. "Anyone here?" No answer, just a distant wail of sirens cutting through the night. Then, a choked sob, small and fragile, followed by a child's whimper. Upstairs, Jake drew his weapon, keeping it low, and swept the flashlight across the threshold. The living room was a war zone. A sofa lay tipped over, cushions shredded. Picture frames littered the floor, smiling faces cracked behind glass. A flat-screen TV dangled from its mount, wires sparking faintly. Dark streaks marred the carpet, dragging toward a hallway. Too much blood, way too much. The smell hit him harder now, metallic and sour, coating his throat. "Police. Miss Harper, you in here?" Another sob, louder, paired with a dull thud thud thud, something heavy slamming against wood. The rhythm was off, too steady, too relentless. Normal people didn't hit like that. Jake's radio sputtered, catching garbled snippets. "Officer down at, doesn't add up, headshots only," before dying again. The hallway stretched ahead, lined with photos. A couple at the beach, a little girl with pigtails holding a teddy bear. Jake's light caught a drip, liquid, dark, falling from the ceiling. He tilted the beam up. A stain bloomed across the plaster, spreading like a bruise. His pulse kicked up. The banging stopped, replaced by a wet, rasping breath. Deep, guttural, wrong. It came from the stairs, just beyond his sight. "Mr. Grayson?" Tom Grayson, this is Officer Sullivan. Let's talk this out. A low sound answered. Not a word, not a groan. Something raw and animalistic that prickled the hair on his neck. Heavy steps shuffled above, dragging closer to the stairwell. Behind a door, a woman's voice broke through, trembling. Help us, please. He's not right. There's so much blood. Jake started up the stairs, gun steady, flashlight painting the walls in harsh white. Blood speckled the steps, some crusted, some fresh and slick. Halfway up, a molar lay discarded, roots dark with gore. His throat tightened. The breathing grew louder, wetter, like air bubbling through a flooded pipe. At the landing, he swung his light left, gouges clawed into a closed door, then right. A figure stood at the hall's end, hunched and still. Tom, hands where I can see him. The head jerked up, sharp and unnatural. Jake's beam caught Tom Grayson's face, and his gut lurched. Bloodshot eyes, jaundiced yellow, stared blankly. Blood coated his chin, dripping from jagged teeth. A flap of skin hung from his cheek, exposing raw muscle. But the worst was the emptiness. No pain, no rage, just a hollow, predatory void. Last chance, Tom. Hands up, down on the floor. The only reply was that ragged, uneven breath. Tom's chest hitched oddly, like his lungs were misfiring. Then he moved, fast, too fast, limbs bending wrong, a marionette with snapped strings. Bloody hands reached for Jake's throat. Stop! Jake backpedaled, nearly tripping down the stairs. Tom's teeth gnashed, inches away, snapping at air. Those eyes, dead, hungry, locked onto him. Jake saw the bite mark on Tom's neck, red and festering, black veins radiating outward. No time to think. He fired. The shot roared, punching through Tom's chest. Blood misted the air, but he didn't flinch, just kept coming, clawing at Jake's vest. Christ! Another shot, same spot. Tom stumbled, but his hands kept grasping, nails raking Kevlar. They tumbled down the stairs together, a chaotic tangle of limbs. Jake's head cracked against the banister, stars exploding in his vision. Tom landed on top, teeth snapping, breath reeking of decay. Jake wedged his arm under Tom's chin, pushing back with everything he had. Shreds of flesh dangled from Tom's mouth. God, what had he done? The bedroom door rattled. Tom, stop. Please. A woman, Jess Harper, screamed. But this wasn't Tom anymore. Jake shoved his gun up, barrel under the jaw. I'm sorry, he rasped, and pulled the trigger. The blast shredded Tom's face, blood and bone spraying the wall. His body went limp, collapsing onto Jake like a sack of wet cement. For a moment, Jake just lay there, chest heaving, Tom's blood hot against his skin. The house fell quiet except for muffled cries from the bedroom. He shoved the corpse off, scrambling back until he hit the wall. His hands shook as he keyed the radio. Dispatch, 312. Shots fired. Suspect down. Static. Outside. Sirens multiplied. Too many, too close. Jess, he called, hauling himself up. He's down. You're safe now. The door creaked open, revealing Jess Harper, mid-30s, clutching a girl, maybe 6, whose face was buried in her mother's shirt. Is he dead? Jess whispered, voice breaking. Please, is he? Jake glanced at Tom's body, the shattered jaw, the graying skin, that bite mark pulsing with something dark. Yeah, but we need to move. Now. A scream tore through the night outside, sharp and bestial, answered by another, then another. His hands fumbled the holster, slick with blood. Tom's blood. The city was waking up, and it was hungry. Jess nodded, clutching her daughter, Mia, tighter. What's happening out there? Jake didn't answer. He couldn't. Roy's corpse lay still, but the sounds beyond the walls told him this was just the start. He checked his SIG, 9 rounds left. Stay close, he said, voice steady despite the tremor in his bones. We're getting out of here. The front door still hung open, the night beyond it alive with movement. Shadows shifted between houses, jerky and wrong. Jake led them to the porch, flashlight cutting through the dark. Something crashed nearby, glass breaking, followed by that wet, rattling breath. Multiple sources now. His cruiser sat 20 feet away, lights still flashing. Their lifeline. A figure lurched into view. A neighbor, maybe, in a bathrobe shredded to rags. Her neck was a mess of torn flesh, her eyes milky and blind. She twitched, head snapping toward them. "Back!" Jake hissed, pushing Jess and Mia behind him. The woman's spine bent, a grotesque arch, her jaw dropping wider than humanly possible. A guttural keen erupted from her throat, echoing down the street. More shapes emerged, drawn by the sound. Jake counted 5, then lost track as they moved closer. Puppets on broken strings, relentless and fast. "Run for the car," he said, voice low. "Don't stop." Jess grabbed Mia's hand, and they bolted. The infected woman charged, faster than she should have been. Jake fired, center mass, out of habit. She staggered, but kept coming. Damn it. He aimed higher, the next shot punching through her forehead. She dropped, limp and final. The others were closing in. Jake sprinted after Jess and Mia, reaching the cruiser as they piled in. He slammed the driver's door just as hands, cold, gray, impossibly strong, slapped the window. The engine roared to life. He threw it into gear, tires screeching as he peeled out. Bodies thudded against the hood, rolling off like ragdolls. In the rear view, they got up again, heads swiveling toward the noise. "What are they?" Mia whimpered, voice tiny. Jake met Jess's eyes in the mirror. Hers were wide, pleading for an answer he didn't have. "I don't know," he said, flooring it. "But we're not sticking around to find out." The city stretched ahead, a maze of fire and shadow. The radio crackled. All units, city-wide alert, then died. They were on their own, and the night was just getting started. The cruiser's engine snarled as Jake swerved around a pickup truck abandoned mid-street, its driver's door flung wide, a smear of blood painting the glass like a grim signature. His hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, Tom Grayson's blood still tacky on his fingers. The city was unraveling. Fires flickered in the distance, their orange glow bouncing off shattered windows. Every corner felt like a trap waiting to spring. "Dispatch, this is 312. Jake barked into the radio, voice tight. "Got hostiles everywhere, violent, aggressive. Need backup now." Static spat back, laced with broken screams. Completely overrun. Bit him, he turned in seconds. They're eating. The signal dissolved into noise. Jake slammed the mic down, cursing under his breath. In the back seat, Mia clung to Jess, her small face pressed into her mom's shoulder. Jess's eyes met Jake's in the rear view, wide and glassy with panic. "What's happening, Officer Sullivan?" Her voice trembled, barely audible over the engine's growl. Outside, shapes staggered from the shadows. Jerky, broken silhouettes drawn by the cruiser's rumble. Their heads snapped toward the sound, milky eyes glinting in the headlights. "No clue," Jake muttered, scanning the road. "But we're not waiting to figure it out." He'd aimed for the precinct, backup, guns, a plan, but the radio chatter painted a different picture. If the station was gone, they'd need a new play. His phone buzzed, signal weak but alive. A text from his partner, Ortiz, "Precinct's a slaughterhouse." Brooks bit, turned fast. "Heading to Rally Point, Lincoln High. Get there." "Change of course," Jake said, yanking the wheel left. "Schools are shot." The cruiser jolted as the front tire blew, rubber shredding against something sharp buried in the asphalt. Jake wrestled the steering wheel as they skidded, metal shrieking, until they smashed into a parked sedan. The impact slammed him forward, seatbelt biting into his chest. Airbags didn't deploy, figures, with his luck. "You okay?" he rasped, twisting to check the back seat. Jess nodded, dazed, clutching Mia tighter. The girl whimpered, curling into a ball. Jake's door was crumpled shut. Through the cracked windshield, he saw it. A jagged strip of rebar and glass spiked across the road. A setup, an ambush. Flashlights bobbed in the dark, cutting through the haze. Voices, not the wet snarls of the infected, but human, harsh and desperate. "Got a live one," someone shouted. "Check it quick. Watch for teeth." Figures emerged, civilians, not cops, wielding bats, tire irons, a shotgun in one guy's hands. Their faces were gaunt, eyes wild with survival. "Out!" the shotgun man bellowed, racking around. "Hands up now." Jake drew his SIG, keeping it low. "Police," he called back. "I've got a woman and kid here. We're clean." The group hesitated, but more lights pinned them from behind. 8, maybe 10 of them, closing in like wolves. "Don't care," shotgun snapped. "Out, or we drag you out." A scream split the air, one of their own, tackled from the shadows. An infected woman in a shredded hoodie sank teeth into his neck, blood jetting black in the flashlight beams. The group erupted into chaos. "Kill it," someone yelled. Shots rang out, wild and sloppy. The infected dropped, but more lurched from the darkness, drawn by the noise. Jake kicked his door, once, twice, metal groaning until it gave. "Back door now," he hissed at Jess. She scrambled, pulling Mia with her. The infected were everywhere now, cutting through the looters like a scythe. Jake fired, dropping one in scrubs as it lunged, its forehead caving under the bullet. "This way." He waved Jess and Mia toward an alley, narrow and choked with trash. Behind them, the looters' screams faded into gurgles as the infected overwhelmed them. The alley swallowed Jake's group, the walls pressing close. His flashlight beam danced over rusted fire escapes and boarded windows. Glass crunched underfoot, a bottle rolling free. "Careful," he whispered, but Jess's eyes locked on his arm. Blood seeped through his sleeve, a gash from the crash he hadn't noticed. "It's not a bite," he said quickly, though her stare didn't soften. A groan echoed behind them. One of the looters stumbled into the alley's mouth, hand clamped over a torn throat. Blood pulsed between his fingers. "Help," he croaked, eyes pleading with Jake's. Then he convulsed, legs buckling, body folding like a broken doll. The sound that followed wasn't human, wet, hungry, alive with intent. "Run," Jake said, voice low and urgent. They bolted deeper into the alley as the looter rose, movements twisting into that marionette jerk. The radio crackled one last time. "All units, cities sealed. Militaries at Carver Bridge. Fall back, regroup. Last call, Godspeed." Static swallowed it whole. Jake glanced back. The looter-turned monster tracked them, head cocked at an impossible angle. Ahead, more noises, shuffling, breathing, closed in from the shadows. "What do we do?" Jess whispered, Mia trembling against her. Jake checked his SIG, 6 rounds left, another clip with 15. Not enough if the horde found them. "We keep moving," he said, scanning the alley. "Adapt. Learn how they hunt." A shriek tore through the night, answered by others, a chorus of predators waking up. He chambered around, leading them deeper into the maze. They track sound, blood. We use that. The city was a carcass now, tearing itself apart bite by bite. Fires bloomed in high-rises, casting warped shadows over wrecked cars and looted storefronts. Every few blocks, a gunshot cracked, followed by a scream that died too fast. Jake kept them off the main roads, sticking to alleys and side streets. But the infected were everywhere, emerging from doorways, clawing out of smashed windows. They rounded a corner onto Jefferson Street, once a bustling strip of shops, now a tomb of stalled vehicles. Some engines still purred, headlights stabbing uselessly into the smoke. A delivery van lay gutted, its doors wide, packages strewn like entrails. Jake's light caught something inside, crawling, broken, dragging itself forward with shattered arms. They hurried past, the wet rasp of its breath chasing them. Mia hadn't spoken since the car, her small hand locked in Jess's, the other pressed to her ear. Smart kid. The sounds were the worst. Shrieks, teeth clacking, the endless drone of something inhuman. Precincts north, Jake said, checking his ammo again. If it's still standing. A figure lurched from behind a dumpster. An officer, uniform tattered, badge glinting. His jaw hung slack, throat a red ruin. Back, Jake breathed, easing them away. The cop's head tilted, tracking them with blind eyes. More emerged, 3, 5, moving like a pack, synchronized in their broken dance. Other way, Jake said, turning them down a side street. An engine roared behind. A pickup truck, black and dented, roared past, plowing through the infected. Bodies flew, cracking against pavement, but they rose again, bones snapping back into place, chasing the truck's noise. They follow sound, Mia whispered, voice barely there. Like on TV. Jake nodded, grim. Yeah, kid. We can work with that. They cut through a parking lot, the city's pulse fading into a cacophony of car alarms and distant blasts. Maybe a gas line, maybe worse. We need cover, he said. Somewhere to breathe. A body dropped from a fire escape, landing on a car hood with a wet thud. Jake yanked Jess and Mia back as it rolled off. An infected man, face half gone, jaw swinging free. It locked onto them, lunging with feral speed. Jake fired, missed, then caught it in the skull on the second shot. More crashed through a storefront, glass exploding outward, drawn by the gunfire. Inside, Jake pointed to a hardware store, its gate half down. Mia slid under first, then Jess, scraping through. Jake followed, boots scraping concrete as the infected closed in. They slammed against the gate, bending metal, teeth gnashing through gaps. Help me. Jake dragged a shelf over, Jess piling on more, tools, paint cans, anything heavy. The barricade held, but the infected kept pushing, faces flattening grotesquely against the bars. Back of the store, Jake panted, flashlights sweeping the aisles. Look for exits. A sharp crack rang out. A rifle, high and precise. Through the gate, infected dropped, heads bursting like overripe fruit. Another shot, then another. Sniper, Jake muttered. Someone's up there. Rotors thumped overhead. A chopper broke the skyline, its spotlight raking the street. A voice boomed. Survivors, city's done. Extraction at Carver Bridge and Union Depot. Last chance, sanitation at sunrise. The bird banked away, leaving the sniper's rifle to sing its deadly tune. More infected flooded the street, drawn by the noise. Sanitation. Jess's voice shook. What's that mean? Jake clenched his jaw. They're torching it, burning the infection out. A crash came from the store's rear, glass shattering, wet breathing slithering through the dark. They're inside, he said, drawing his gun. 5 rounds left. Loading dock moved. The first infected emerged, an employee, apron shredded, eyes blank and white. Jake fired, dropping it mid-stride. More followed, shadows birthing monsters. Go! They ran, the store collapsing into chaos behind them. The sniper's shots faded, swallowed by the night's hungry roar. Sunrise was coming, and with it, fire. They weren't dead yet, but the city wasn't done with them. The hardware store's back door groaned as Jake shoved it open, the hinges screaming in protest. His flashlight beam stabbed into the alley beyond, catching puddles of oil-slick water and a dumpster tipped on its side, spilling trash like a gutted animal. The air was thick with smoke, the distant growl of flames chewing through the city. Behind them, the infected poured into the store, their wet, ragged breaths echoing off the aisles. Too many, too close. Keep moving, Jake barked, ushering Jess and Mia through the gap. His SIG Sauer trembled in his hand, down to 4 rounds. The infected employee's corpse lay sprawled inside, but its kin were already scrambling over it, clawing at the shelves they'd piled against the front gate. The barricade wouldn't hold much longer. Jess stumbled, clutching Mia's hand, her face streaked with sweat and grime. The girl's eyes were wide, darting toward every shadow, but she stayed silent, tougher than most adults Jake had seen tonight. The alley stretched ahead, a claustrophobic tunnel of brick and rusting fire escapes. Above, the sniper's rifle cracked again, each shot a lifeline cutting through the chaos. Infected dropped in the street beyond, skulls popping like firecrackers, but the horde kept coming, drawn by the noise. "Loading docks this way," Jake said, voice low and urgent. He led them past a stack of rotting pallets, his light catching a service ladder bolted to the wall. "Up there, roof might give us a shot at linking with whoever's picking them off." Jess nodded, her breathing ragged but determined. She boosted Mia onto the first rung, the girl's small hands gripping the cold metal. A crash erupted behind them. The store's gate buckled, metal shrieking as infected flooded through. Jake spun, firing twice. The first shot caught a lurching figure in the chest. Useless, it kept coming. The second punched through its forehead, dropping it cold. 2 rounds left. "Climb," he shouted, shoving Jess toward the ladder. She scrambled up after Mia, her shoes slipping on the rungs. The infected charged, an old man in a torn cardigan, a woman in a nightgown, their movements jerky and wrong, like broken toys wound too tight. Jake grabbed a loose plank from the pallets and swung, cracking the old man's skull. Bone gave way with a wet crunch, but the woman lunged, teeth snapping inches from his arm. He drove the plank into her face, shoving her back into the pack. It bought seconds, nothing more. He hit the ladder, boots pounding rungs as the infected clawed at the base. Their fingers scraped metal, too stiff, too cold, like they'd been dead longer than made sense. Halfway up, he felt the ladder shudder, weight below, climbing after him. He risked a glance. The nightgown woman, her jaw unhinged, milky eyes locked on his boots. Jake kicked down, heel smashing her face. She fell, taking 2 others with her, but more replaced them, relentless. The roof was a flat expanse of gravel and vents, the city's burning skyline sprawling around them. Jess and Mia crouched near the edge, peering toward the sniper's perch, a 5-story office building a block away. The rifle's muzzle flashed, steady and surgical, thinning the horde below. "He's good," Jess whispered, voice tight with hope. "Yeah," Jake said, catching his breath. "But he's alone." The chopper's warning replayed in his head, Carver Bridge and Union Depot. Union was closer, 15 blocks east through hell, but reachable if they moved fast. Smoke stung his eyes as he scanned the roof. A fire escape zigzagged down the far side, their ticket off this perch. A scream ripped through the night, sharp and human, from the alley they'd fled. Something glass-heavy shattered. "They're everywhere," Mia said, her voice a ghost of itself. Jake knelt beside her, forcing calm he didn't feel. "We're smarter than them, kid. They're strong, but dumb. Follow noise, sniff out blood. We stay quiet, we stay alive." The sniper's shots faltered, then stopped. Silence fell, heavy and wrong. Jake's gut twisted. He's out, or overrun. The fire escape rattled as they descended, boots clanging on metal. At the bottom, the alley opened into a side street littered with wreckage. Cars piled like discarded toys, a bus on its side, windows dark with blood. The infected were here too, staggering between obstacles, heads swiveling toward any sound. Jake motioned them behind a tipped-over SUV, its engine still ticking faintly. "Truck's gone," he muttered, picturing it surrounded back at the store. "We're on foot." He checked his ammo. 2 rounds in the SIG, 15 in the spare clip. Not enough for a straight run to Union Depot. They'd need a miracle. A roar cut through the haze. A motorcycle, engine snarling as it tore down the street. Its rider, a wiry guy in a leather jacket, swerved around debris, an infected clinging to his back. He shook it off, smashing it against a car hood, but more surged from the shadows. The bike skidded, then righted, speeding off. The infected followed, a wave of broken bodies chasing the noise. "There's our distraction," Jake said. Move, now. They darted across the street, sticking to cover, an overturned newsstand, a burned-out storefront. The city was a graveyard of its own making. Every block a snapshot of collapse. A stroller tipped in a gutter, blood pooling beneath it. A pawn shop gutted, guns stripped from the racks. Sirens wailed in jagged bursts, cutting off as fast as they started. They hit a commercial strip, once alive with neon, now dark and hollow. A fire station loomed ahead, its brick facade shadowed against the orange sky. Inside, Jake whispered, pointing to a side door. The main bay doors were shut, but the smaller entrance hung ajar, glass intact. Too quiet, too easy. He eased it open, SIG ready, lights sweeping the gloom. The hallway was a mess, gear lockers pried open, helmets and coats strewn across the tile. A bloody boot print smeared the floor, trailing toward the back. "Stay tight," Jake said, stepping inside. The air was stale, heavy with that copper tang he couldn't shake. Mia pointed to a break room off the hall. Overturned chairs, a coffee mug shattered on a table, a TV flickering silently with an emergency crawl, shelter in place. "Do not engage." "Look," she whispered, nodding at a wall-mounted first aid kit. Jake smashed the lock with his flashlight, but, grabbing gauze, tape, anything useful. His arm throbbed where the crash had cut him, blood soaking his sleeve. He wrapped it quick, hiding the red. Jess found a radio in a comms nook. Old school, dials glowing faintly. Jake twisted the knob, static hissing low. "Perimeter at Union Depot holding." A voice broke through. "Firebombing at dawn. Bridge is gone." Repeat, "Carver Bridge is gone." Jake's stomach sank. Union was their only shot now, and dawn wasn't far off. A clang echoed deeper in the station, metal dragging, slow and deliberate. He killed the radio, plunging them into silence pierced by that wet, gurgling breath. "Storage," he breathed, nudging them toward a side door. Heavy footsteps thudded closer, uneven but purposeful. Jake cracked the door, peering through. A figure shambled past. Firefighter, gear intact, helmet dangling to reveal gray, mottled skin. Another joined it, moving faster, its axe still clipped to its belt. They paused, heads tilting, nostrils flaring like they could smell the blood on Jake's arm. Mia bumped a shelf. Something metal clattered, loud as a gunshot in the stillness. Both infected snapped toward them, the door bursting inward as the first charged. Jake shoved Jess and Mia back, meeting it head-on. The firefighter's gloved hands grabbed his shoulders, impossibly strong, teeth snapping behind a cracked visor. Jake drew a fire axe from the wall, swinging hard. The blade bit into its neck, lodging deep, blood sprayed, dark and thick, but it kept pushing, pinning him against a rack. "Run," he roared, wrestling the thing. Jess pulled Mia toward the loading bay, the second infected lunging after them. Jake yanked a hose reel loose, tangling its legs. It crashed, buying him a heartbeat. He swung again, axe cracking the first one's skull. It dropped, finally still. The second was up, closing on Jess. Jake fired, one round, grazing its cheek. One left. He tackled it, slamming it into a workbench. Tools scattered as it thrashed, jaws working inches from his face, that rotting stench flooding his lungs. Jess grabbed a wrench, smashing its temple. Bone crumpled, and it went limp. Silence fell, broken only by their panting. Loading bay, Jake gasped, hauling himself up. They stumbled into a cavern of overturned gear. A fire truck lay tipped, blocking half the space. The bay door was cracked open, just enough. "Outside, go!" The storage door exploded behind them as more infected poured in, drawn by the fight. Jake helped Mia under, then Jess, sliding through as boots thundered closer. They hit the rear lot, the sky a sick amber from the fires. A response truck sat nearby, keys glinting in the ignition. "In," Jake shouted, piling them inside. The infected crashed through the bay door, tearing metal like foil. Jake turned the key, The engine roared. He reversed hard, bumper smashing the lead infected into the pavement. It clawed at the hood. He floored it, crushing it against the station wall until its skull split, black blood pooling. The truck idled, their breaths fogging the cab. "Everyone good?" Jake asked, voice raw. Jess nodded, holding Mia close. He checked his watch, 90 minutes to dawn. The radio crackled. "Union Depot holding, trains out on the hour. Last call before the burn." "Union it is," Jake said, reloading his SIG, 15 rounds now. The axe sat beside him, gore-streaked but ready. "We've got a shot." The city burned around them, a labyrinth of death, but the truck hummed with promise. They weren't done yet, not by a long shot. The response truck's engine thundered as Jake wove through the city's carcass, its bull bar shoving aside a tangle of bicycles and a tipped trash bin. The streets were a nightmare collage. Cars piled like broken toys, storefronts gutted, their glass teeth glinting in the firelight. Smoke hung thick, clawing at his lungs through the cracked window. Every turn revealed more chaos. A delivery scooter crushed under a fallen pole, a billboard blazing with half a smiling face, the rest charred away. "Please," a voice cried from the dark, thin and desperate. "Help us." Jake's hands tightened on the wheel, his jaw clenching. They'd passed survivors all night, some pounding on windows, others too stunned to move, but stopping was suicide. This voice, though, cut deeper, young, raw, pleading. A figure stumbled into the headlights, a kid, maybe 20, shirt torn, leg dragging. He waved frantically, hobbling toward the truck. "Officer," Jess started, her voice cracking from the passenger seat. Mia peeked over her arm, eyes huge in the dashboard glow. "We can't just—" "I know." Jake cut in, slamming the brakes. The truck shuddered to a stop. He grabbed the axe from the seat, its handle still tacky with blood. "Stay here. Engine on. Anything moves wrong, you go, don't wait." He stepped out, SIG in one hand, axe in the other, boots crunching glass. The kid stopped 10 feet off, hands up, panting. "Thank you, God. I thought I was done." "They're everywhere." Blood streaked his face, but his eyes were clear, no milky haze. "You hurt?" Jake asked, keeping his distance. "No." Car flipped, the kid gasped. "Name's Ryan. Was with my sister, but she got bit. Changed fast. I ran." His voice broke, guilt bleeding through. "There's others, trapped back there. I was looking for help." Screams tore through the night, close, too close, followed by sporadic gunfire. The city's death rattle was deafening now. "Show me," Jake said, clipped and urgent. Ryan led him down a side street, the truck's headlights fading behind. A sedan lay upside down, its roof crumpled, windows spiderwebbed. Hands slapped the glass from inside, weak but alive. "Hey," a woman's voice muffled. "We're stuck." Jake approached, lights sweeping the shadows. No infected yet, but the clock was ticking. The car's frame had buckled, doors jammed tight. "Back up," he called, hefting the axe. The blade smashed through the windshield, glass raining like brittle snow. Two crawled out, a woman in her 40s, hair wild, and a teenage boy, skinny and pale. "I'm Lisa," she said, catching her breath. "This is my nephew, Ethan. Been here since it started." "We're heading to Union Depot," Jake said. "Military's pulling out there." "Come," Metal screeched, cutting him off. An infected burst from an alley, an overweight guy in a stained tank top, jaw swinging loose, sprinting on all fours. Jake swung the axe, but it dodged, slamming into Ryan. The kid screamed as teeth sank into his arm, blood spraying dark across the pavement. "Damn it!" Jake drove the blade into the thing's skull, wrenching it free as it slumped. Ryan writhed, clutching the bite, black veins already snaking under his skin. "No, no," he moaned, eyes pleading. "How long?" Jake demanded, voice hard. "How fast did your sister turn?" 10 minutes, Ryan choked. "Maybe less." Lisa grabbed Ethan, backing away. "He's done." We have to go. Ryan convulsed, spine arching, a wet gurgle bubbling from his throat. Run, Jake barked, shoving them toward the truck. Behind, Ryan staggered upright, movements twisting into that puppet jerk rhythm. His head snapped toward them, feral and gone. Tires squealed. A sedan roared from across street, nearly clipping them, then sped off, horn blaring. The noise pulled infected from every shadow, dozens, heads swiveling, charging in a broken wave. Inside, Jake pointed to a pawn shop, its door chained but loose. He shot the lock, metal pinging free, and they piled in. Lisa, Ethan, then Jake, slamming the door as infected slammed against it. He looped the chain through the handles, knotting it tight. Bodies thudded outside, the plywood windows shuddering under the weight. Barricaded. Lisa and Ethan dragged a display case over, guns long looted, just empty racks now. Jake swept his light around, shelves toppled, cash registers smashed, a back room barely visible through the gloom. A scream froze him. An infected dropped from the ceiling, tiles crashing around it. It tackled Lisa, teeth snapping at her throat. Jake fired, one shot, straight through its temple. It collapsed, but the gunshot rang like a dinner bell. The pounding outside doubled, fists and faces mashing against the windows. Ceilings compromised, Ethan said, voice shaking, pointing up as more tiles shifted. They're crawling in. The front exploded inward. A pickup truck plowed through, metal twisting, infected spilling behind it like floodwater. Back door. Jake yelled, firing into the swarm. 2 rounds, 2 headshots, not enough. They retreated to the stockroom, the horde surging behind. A dumpster blocked the rear exit. Jake and Ethan shoved, muscles burning, until it scraped aside. Lisa slipped through, then Ethan. Jake followed, an infected grabbing his leg mid-climb. He kicked free, teeth grazing his boot, and drew a flare from the truck's stash. Striking it, he tossed it back. The magnesium blaze caught a puddle of spilled paint thinner, fire erupting in a whoosh. Infected shrieked, burning but still moving, flesh sizzling. They sprinted, the pawn shop blazing behind them. The truck, Jake shouted, spotting it, surrounded. Infected pounded the windows, cracks spidering the glass. Jess and Mia crouched inside, faces pale. New plan, Jake said, counting rounds, 9 left. A police bike lay nearby, engine warm, key in the ignition. Beyond it, Union Depot's lights flickered, trains howling in the distance. Jess, Jake called. When I signal, drive, straight to the station. We'll meet you. He fired 3 shots, dropping infected near the driver's side. The horde turned, drawn to him. Now, the truck roared, crashing through the line, bodies bouncing off the hood. It peeled away, horn blaring, pulling the swarm with it. Hold on. Jake straddled the bike, Ethan behind him, Lisa gripping a salvaged shopping cart. He gunned it, cartwheels screeching as they tore through the streets. Infected lunged. Jake swerved, clipping them with the bike, blood spraying. Rounds ran dry. He used the bike itself, smashing through reaching hands. The station loomed, a brick bastion ringed by military Humvees, searchlights slashing the dark. An infected hit the cart, nearly tipping it. Lisa screamed, kicking it off. Ethan yanked it under the wheels, bone crunching. More closed in, a pack sprinting with unnatural speed. The bike howled, engine redlining. Ahead, the truck reached the barricade. Soldiers pulled Jess and Mia through razor wire. Jump, Jake yelled as they hit the perimeter. Lisa dove, rolling clear. Ethan leapt as soldiers opened fire, mowing down infected in tight bursts. Jake laid the bike down, sliding under snapping jaws, bullets whizzing overhead. He scrambled up, lungs burning. Jess ran to him, Mia clinging to her. You made it, she gasped. A soldier hauled him through the gate. Trains in 5 moved. Dawn bled over the horizon, fires blooming behind them. Infected still came, endless, hungry, but they'd crossed the line. For now, they were alive. Union Depot's cavernous hull was a war zone turned refugee camp. Wounded sprawled on the marble, medics darting between them, checking for bites. Jake slumped against a pillar, axe gone, SIG empty. His partner, Ortiz, limped over, arm bandaged. Sullivan, damn, you're a ghost now. His grin faded. Bridge fell. Captain Brooks turned, ripped through us like a tank. A scream cut through. A man convulsed, foam at his lips, bite mark blackening his leg. Soldiers dragged him out, his pleas fading to gurgles. No risks, Ortiz muttered. Turned or not, you're out. Jake scanned the crowd. Lisa and Ethan with medics. Mia curled against Jess. Faces everywhere, haunted, hiding wounds. Any one of them could be next. A captain approached, clipboard in hand. Officer Sullivan, debrief, now? What did you see? Jake straightened, voice steady despite the ache. Bites spread it. Turns fast, minutes now. Body shots don't work, head only. They hunt sound, blood, move in packs, smarter than they look. The captain nodded, grim. Matches reports. They're adapting, stacking bodies to climb walls at the bridge. City's gone. An explosion rocked the hull, south barricade breached. Gunfire erupted, heavy and close. Fall back. The captain barked into his radio. Load the trains, now. The hull surged, soldiers herding survivors toward platforms, medics grabbing gear. Jake pulled Jess and Mia close, Ortiz limping beside them. They ducked under iron gates as infected smashed through the main hall, a tidal wave of gray flesh and snapping teeth. 3 trains idled ahead, troops manning mounted guns. This one, Jake shoved them into a car, half full of hollow-eyed civilians. A soldier checked wounds. Jake showed his gash, Ortiz his bandage. Clean for now. The train lurched, pulling away as infected flooded the station. Through the window, Jake saw Captain Brooks, massive, grotesque, muscles bulging under dead skin, smash a barricade, leading the horde like a warlord. Take him, a voice screamed. Bullets tore into him, but he kept coming, eyes glinting with something dark, something aware. Don't look, Jake told Mia, pulling her close. Dawn broke, and bombs fell, mushroom clouds swallowing the city block by block. The train roared north, salvation in motion. But Jake watched the passengers, hollow faces, hidden cuts. The nightmare wasn't over. Not yet. The train's wheels clacked against the tracks, a relentless rhythm that vibrated through Jake Sullivan's bones as he slumped against the cold metal wall. The passenger car smelled of sweat, blood, and fear, dozens of survivors packed tight, their faces lit by the flicker of dying city lights streaming through cracked windows. Outside, the horizon bled red and gold, dawn clawing its way up as mushroom clouds swallowed what was left of the metropolis. Flames danced in the distance, devouring streets Jake had patrolled for nearly a decade, turning them to ash in the military's final sanitization sweep. Jess sat across from him, Mia curled in her lap, the girl's small hands clutching her mother's jacket. Her eyes were shut tight, but Jake knew she wasn't sleeping. Too smart, too aware of the hell they'd escaped. Beside them, Ortiz leaned on a makeshift crutch, his bandaged arm stiff at his side. Lisa and Ethan huddled nearby, the woman whispering to her nephew, her voice a fragile thread against the train's groan. The car was a gallery of broken lives, strangers bound by survival, each one a potential time bomb. Jake's hands rested empty, his SIG long dry, the axe lost somewhere in the chaos of Union Depot. His arm throbbed where the crash had sliced it. The gauze Jess had wrapped now stained a faint pink. He scanned the car, instinct kicking in despite the exhaustion dragging at him. A woman in a torn coat clutched a bloody scarf, her fingers trembling. An old man with a bandaged hand stared blankly at the floor. A teenage girl sat alone, unblinking, her sleeve tugged low over her wrist. Any one of them could be hiding it. A bite, a scratch, the first black veins of infection. "Ortiz," Jake said, voice low, rough as gravel. "How bad was the bridge?" His partner shifted, wincing as he adjusted his leg. "Bad." Captain Brooks turned into something else, huge, fast. Tore through the line like it was paper. Saw him rip a Humvee door off its hinges before they lit him up. Took 3 mags to the head to drop him. Ortiz shook his head, eyes dark. "It's getting worse, man. They're not just rabid, they're thinking." Jake nodded. The memory of Brooks smashing through the station's barricade burned into his skull. Those eyes, milky but sharp, aware, haunted him. The infected were evolving, hunting smarter, moving like packs with a purpose. He'd seen it in the way they'd stacked bodies at the bridge, the way they'd tracked the truck's horn. Whatever this was, it wasn't stopping at the city limits. A scream shattered the car's fragile quiet. Heads snapped toward the sound. A man near the front, 30s, suit shredded, doubled over. Foam flecked his lips, his body jerking like a puppet on frayed strings. A soldier in fatigues lunged forward, rifle up. "Show your arms." The man's sleeve fell back, a bite mark, swollen and black, veins spidering up his elbow. "No, please," he gasped, but his jaw popped, a wet crack echoing as his skin grayed. "Out!" the soldier barked, grabbing him. 2 more joined, dragging him toward the car's rear door as he thrashed, his pleas turning to gurgles. Passengers shrank back, some sobbing, others frozen. The door slid open, wind roared in, carrying the stench of burning rubber, and they shoved him out. His body hit the tracks, tumbling into the dark. The door slammed shut, leaving a heavy silence. "No chances," Ortiz muttered, voice flat. "Seen it too many times tonight. One turns, the whole line's gone." Jake's stomach twisted. He'd watched Ryan change in minutes, 10, maybe less. Brooks had been faster. If the infection was accelerating, they weren't safe here, barricaded trains or not. The car lurched, brakes hissing as it slowed. Jake pressed his face to the window. Other trains converged on parallel tracks, headlights cutting through the haze. Northbound, toward whatever safe zones the military had left. Beyond the glass, suburbs burned, skeletal houses collapsing into embers. A gas station exploded in the distance, a fireball blooming against the dawn. The infected were out there still, shadows darting between wrecks, drawn to the noise of retreating humanity. "Where are we going?" Jess asked, her voice small but steady. She brushed Mia's hair, a mother's reflex against the abyss. Jake met her eyes, saw the weight she carried. Tom's death, the house they'd fled, a life erased in hours. "North," he said. "Military's got rally points past the quarantine line. Maybe Lincoln High." Ortiz's crew was headed there. He didn't add the rest, if it's still standing. Mia stirred, lifting her head. "Will it be safe?" Her voice was a whisper, but it cut deeper than the gunfire outside. Jake forced a half smile, the best he could muster. "We'll make it safe, kid. Stick together, watch each other's backs. That's how we got this far." She nodded, barely, and buried her face again. The train jolted, a sharp bang against the hull. Jake tensed, hand reaching for a weapon he didn't have. Another thud, then a rhythmic hammering. "What the hell?" Ortiz started, but Jake was already up, peering through the window. Infected clung to the train's side, gray hands clawing at seams, teeth gnashing against steel. One, a woman, half her face gone, locked eyes with him, her gaze chillingly focused. She slammed her head against the glass, cracks spidering outward. "Get down," Jake shouted, pulling Jess and Mia to the floor. Soldiers stormed the car, rifles barking as they fired through the windows. Glass shattered, wind howling in. The infected woman fell, skull split, but more took her place, climbing, relentless, drawn by the train's rumble. "They're on the roof," a soldier yelled, voice cracking with panic. The car erupted, passengers screamed, soldiers shouted orders. Jake grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall, swinging it like a club as an infected arm broke through a side panel, groping blindly. He smashed it down, bone snapping, black blood oozing. "Hold the line," a sergeant roared, unloading a burst into the ceiling. Thuds answered, bodies dropping, but the hammering didn't stop. "They're tracking us," Jake said, breathless, helping Ortiz up. Knew they'd follow sound, didn't think they'd hitch a ride. The train picked up speed, engine screaming as it barreled through the burning outskirts. Outside, infected leapt from overpasses, some splattering on impact, others landing with sickening cracks only to rise again, bones realigning. A soldier stumbled back, clutching his neck, blood sprayed between his fingers, an infected's teeth buried deep before a headshot dropped it. "Check him," the sergeant snapped, but the soldier convulsed, eyes rolling white. They dragged him out, another body lost to the tracks. Jake watched, chest tight. Too fast, seconds now. The infection was a wildfire, and they were kindling. The car settled, gunfire fading to sporadic pops. Jake sank beside Jess, adrenaline bleeding out, leaving him hollow. "We're not out yet," he said, more to himself than her. She nodded, silent, her hand resting on Mia's back. Lisa rocked Ethan gently. He hadn't spoken since the pawn shop, his face a mask of shock. Ortiz stared out the window, muttering, "Gotta be a line somewhere, something they can't cross." The train's radio crackled, a voice cutting through. "All units, this is Northern Command. Quarantine zone established 50 miles out. Infected presence confirmed beyond city limits. Hold position, reinforcements inbound." Static swallowed the rest. Jake exchanged a look with Ortiz. Reinforcements sounded good, but beyond city limits didn't. This wasn't contained. It was spreading. Dawn fully broke, sunlight streaming through the shattered windows, painting the car in harsh gold. It should have felt like hope, but it didn't. Jake studied the passengers again. The woman with the scarf, now rocking back and forth. The old man, coughing into his sleeve. The teenage girl, still unblinking, her hands now clenching her seat. He leaned close to Jess, voice barely audible. "Keep an eye out. Anyone twitches wrong, we move." She nodded, fierce despite the exhaustion carving lines into her face. "Together," she said, echoing his words from the station. Mia peeked up, her small hand finding Jake's. He squeezed it, a silent promise he wasn't sure he could keep. The train rocked on, miles piling up between them and the inferno they'd left. But the silence in the car grew heavier, broken only by ragged breaths and the distant clatter of claws on metal. Jake's gut churned. He'd seen too much to trust this reprieve. The infected weren't done. They were adapting, waiting. Somewhere in this car, someone was ticking down to zero, and when they turned, the fight would start again. He settled back, keeping Jess and Mia close, Ortiz at his side, Lisa and Ethan in his peripheral. They'd survived the night, clawed their way through a city that ate itself alive, but survival wasn't victory. "Not yet. We watch," he murmured. "We wait. Whatever comes, we face it." The train barreled north, dawn's light spilling over a world remade in blood and fire. The nightmare had begun in darkness, but it thrived in the daybreak, a shadow no bomb could burn away. Jake's eyes stayed open, tired but unyielding, fixed on the faces around him. They'd made it this far, together. Now they just had to hold on. And that's the end, folks. What a ride. Jake, Jess, Mia, and the crew fought tooth and nail through a city turned slaughterhouse. And here they are, battered but breathing, staring down an uncertain dawn. If this hit you in the gut like it did me, smash that like button. It's fuel for more stories like this. Subscribe if you want to see where these survivors go next, because trust me, this infection's got legs, and I've got ideas. Drop a comment. Tell me who you're rooting for, what you'd do in Jake's boots. Your voice keeps this alive. Until next time, stay sharp out there. The night's over, but the fight's just beginning.